My name is Maureen. Today, I'd like to talk about a case study, what I've found from teaching both remotely and teaching hybrid in the Latin classroom in the last 18 months. And that's really how to support neurodiverse students. I would say that the students that I had were neurodiverse, had a lot of issues with going remote, going hybrid. And I think I didn't realize before how centering neurodiverse students and thinking about their needs as I was applying different lessons to my classroom really helped all students. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. If you would like to follow along at your own pace or access these slides at a later time, please go to the website tinyurl.com/neurodiversity case study LAM. Again, that's tinyurl.com/neurodiversity case study LAM. So what we're really talking about is, how do we create supports for all students? That's really important at all times in the classroom, but especially from the lessons we've learned in these last 18 months. And when we support all students, everyone benefits. I remember hearing an anecdote that when you create a ramp going into a building, you're not only helping those people that might need the ramp because of needing to use a wheelchair or needing to use crutches or something like that, but you're also helping people with strollers, you're helping people who might have trouble with stairs, you're helping a lot of different people by creating that ramp. And so really, by doing a lot of these things, the whole class will benefit. And we don't always know what support students need. So by having an open conversation with students, by keeping communication going, we can find out what the needs of our students are and accommodate those needs. So as we go through this case study review, here are the parts we're going to go through. We're going to go through communication is key, understanding organization, frequent formative fun, differentiation, and anticipating assessment. We're going to start with communication is key. There is nothing really that's more important in the classroom than communication. Input, output, feedback. The feedback loop is what keeps everything going. And that's between the student and the teacher and the student, and also students to their colleagues in the classroom and their peers in the classroom. And so give lots of opportunity for communication. We're going to talk about one-on-one check-ins, commenting on work, SEL check-ins, weekly reflections, exit tickets, reflections on assessments, and indications of when to move on. For one-on-one check-ins, I find that it's important to schedule these if you have time and you're available with students, just to see how they're doing, to talk about goals and things like that. You can use, if you have a Google Classroom, you can use the Google Calendar, you can use Google Meet, you can use Zoom. I really like to remind students about our meetings because that's really what's important. Make sure students can make it. Showing up is half the battle. And so using something like Arist or Calendly or Remind can be really helpful. Calendly is something where students can select free periods that you have of time from your Google Calendar. And I find that that works really well for a lot of students. Remind and Arist are both texting, but you don't give out your number. You create a class on that and you have kind of a class text message going on. And I don't know about you, but I find that my students are much more likely to check their text messages than they are to check their email. So that's why that seems to be something that works well when I'm trying to schedule meetings with students. Also, commenting on work. There are many different ways you can comment on work. Some of the things that I find to be really helpful are, for example, when I'm using Google Docs, if I'm using the comment function, there's a new tool where you write the @ symbol with the student's email address. If you do that, then you can assign that comment to a student so they can see that you are talking directly to them. This is great when students are doing collaborative work. Similarly, with something like Padlet, when students are all contributing, they're brainstorming, they're talking about their ideas, you can comment on their work using Padlet. Additionally, something I really, really like is Mote. I know that sometimes when I write feedback, students aren't as inclined to read it. And so I really like Moat because it allows you to do up to 30 seconds of voice recording and leave that as a comment for students. And you can leave that on slides, you can leave that on Google Classroom, or you can leave that on Google Docs. And I find that my students are much more likely to listen to something than to read it. So that can be really, really helpful. Also, SEL check-ins, regardless of what the student's background is, regardless of who they are, it's important to know how they're doing. And I really like Pear Deck for this, and I'm going to show you some of the Pear Deck slides I use, but also Flipgrid to provide something a little more private where students can take a video of themselves showing their face or not. I have a lot of students who like to cover their face with a sticker or an emoji, but just tell you how they're doing and checking in with them. And also the important question that I usually ask is, what do you need? How can I help? Things like that. Or what do you want your teacher to know? I think those are all really helpful questions. Additionally, I like to use things like a virtual whiteboard. I tend to use a lot of Whiteboardify. And I like Whiteboardify because when I'm doing an SEL check-in, students can put in emojis. And I think that that can be really, really helpful to have an emoji there just to show how they're feeling or express themselves in typing if that's how they would rather do it. It gives them a wide range of options of how they want to express how they're feeling. These are the Pear Deck slides I was talking about. So this is what is filling your bucket today and what's draining it. And I always make these optional. I don't want to push students, but if students want to share, I want them to feel free to do so. Also doing a stress check. I did this a lot last year, and I found that students were usually willing to answer this. And it really helped me in class because if I saw that the whole class was at a high level of stress, then I would change what I was doing or kind of think about how I could be flexible with them. And another thing to mention is when I would do a Pear Deck like this, I wouldn't want everyone to see everybody else's stress check. So what I would do is I would have everyone working at their own pace so that only I was seeing the Pear Deck. And because I don't want them to know necessarily how stressed everybody else is because they might not want to be sharing that. I also like to do, like I said, Flipgrid. So again, using it for SEL check-ins, but there are other ways you can use Flipgrid. I just wanted to mention briefly, for example, having students at the beginning of the year pronounce their names, give their pronouns, and share what they want a teacher to know. Have some opportunities for social sharing. So maybe share something fun you did and then make this public, like share something you want to share with your colleagues about, I don't even know, your favorite ice cream flavor, or maybe a fun fact about you. Or maybe if there's no fun fact, maybe just share a good joke you heard recently or what your theme song would be if you were to walk around with a theme song, something like that, just something fun. I also like it for debates because it can be kind of asynchronous, but they can reply to each other's videos, which is pretty fun. And finally, to practice presentational tasks. I find that this is probably the most helpful for students. When they're going to do a presentational task in class, I have them do a Flipgrid beforehand, and then I give them feedback on that Flipgrid. That way I can have time to look at all of the students' Flipgrids before they present and give them feedback before the presentation. And then they got an opportunity to rehearse that presentation on Flipgrid. So it's really a win-win situation. I also do weekly reflections. And if you end up going to the document, if you click on that Google form, it will pop up. So my weekly reflection includes a bunch of emojis and people say how they're feeling. It includes, what did you find success with this week? What did you find challenging? What do you want your teacher to know? And how can I help? I found a huge difference by including this weekly. I think that students were very honest about what they needed, and students also felt that they had this avenue to communicate with me. Now, not every student filled it out each week, and that's okay, but it was good that students knew that this was something they could do when they needed it, and that was important to me. And I really appreciated all the feedback, even if it was critical feedback that I got in the last year, because I think it was very helpful for me as a teacher to know what my students needed. Also, exit tickets, very similar questions to the weekly reflection, but usually just limited to what did you find success with? What did you find challenging? And what do you want your teacher to know? That's it. So I'll do that on Google Forms. I'll do that on Google Formative. I would do that on, oh, now it's formative, sorry. On Quizlet, I would have students do an exit ticket instead of these questions. And so the exit ticket would be really like, review one more time what we went over in class. And the exit ticket would be very similar in Pear Deck. What did we go over in class? Answer a couple of questions about what we did in class. Also, reflections on assessments. At the end of an assessment, having students, again, answer those 3 questions. What did you find success with? What did you find challenging? And what do you want your teacher to know? And I would get all sorts of answers for this. It really depended. So I would get, I want you to know I studied really hard, even if it doesn't look like it, or I really love this test format. This was great, or all sorts of things. So it really ran the gamut, or I didn't do well on the test because I wasn't feeling well today. That's really important to know. And that's important to know about students. So it's almost like a social emotional learning check-in at the end of a test. See how they're doing and how they're feeling right after the test. And so that helps me when I go back and look at their progress on the test. Finally, another thing I've been using is students are indicating when to move on. And what I mean by that is before I move on to the next task, I'll say, everyone good? And you can give a thumbs up. And if someone's not giving a thumbs up, I'll say, okay, what do we need to go over? And I'll solicit some advice from the students and see, okay, what do we need? Or have students do something like slow down, slow down, slow down. And so I have my arm slow down. So different hand gestures where students can indicate what they need. So coming up with that common set of hand gestures is really important at the beginning of the year. Last year, we were able to use emojis on Zoom, which was super helpful. But in the in-person classroom, I find that that's a good way for students to indicate they're not ready to move on, or they need you to slow down without them saying something or feeling like they're interrupting or something like that. It's a way, it's kind of a low stakes way for them to say, no, we can't move on yet. Let's stay where we are. Let's review what we're doing. I have more questions. And so that's something that can be really, really helpful. And another thing that I'm going to do, I'm reading Grading for Equity, and it's blowing my mind, but I think flexible deadlines are so very important and something to talk about with students. And when you are giving flexible deadlines, it doesn't just mean hand it in whenever. Have a conversation with that student that's going to hand it in later and talk about a plan. Talk about a plan for that deadline and really work that out with the student in advance, because then flexible deadlines make a little more sense, because students always have a lot going on. But if they can plan a time like, okay, I can't get this project in the 15th because I have a science test, but 2 days later, I can get it in on the 17th. So coming up with a plan, be having flexibility, but coming up with a plan of action going forward is really, really helpful. Next, we're going to talk about understanding organization. And sometimes students don't understand why we do what we do and how things are organized. So I try to be really upfront with my students and go through everything very quick, very slowly. And so everyone understands right away. So as soon as they come in the classroom, explaining how my learning management system works, explaining how my grading works, explaining how things work in my classroom. And so let's talk a little bit about this. So first of all, students should understand how the learning management system is set up. Is it set up by week? Is it set up by topic, date? Are there multiple assessments in there? Assignments in there? How is it set up? And so I put 5 different examples there below. I tend to be more like the last example, where I have a unit and then I have things underneath for each unit, and like kind of broken down into smaller chunks, but you really can set it up however you want, as long as students are part of the conversation. And I periodically will ask students for feedback, either in that weekly reflection or just as we're talking in class about how's the learning management system going for you? Is there anything you would change? How can I help you navigate that system better? So I think that that's something important to talk about with students as well. Another thing you can do in a few learning management systems now is add emojis. And why this is important is students will have a picture to indicate what that assignment is. So let's say it is working on a project. Maybe you come up with an emoji that class means project. And this can be the same for all of your classes, or you can come up with different emojis based on the class. It's kind of a fun activity. Or what is going to be a video assignment? What will that emoji look like? And so coming up with emojis just to indicate with pictures too, what is expected of students with each of these assignments. It can be kind of fun, and it can bring a lot of clarity to the different assignments. One of the things that I was using during the pandemic that I will continue to use as the pandemic continues is using a wayfinding doc or Google site with everything for each day. So if each day is a slide, and I have all of what I call the synchronous activities, which are the things we're going to do in class, and there are links to everything. And then the asynchronous activities are the optional kind of homework assignments, but I'm calling it asynchronous because students can just do those on their own time when they want to. And it's just ways for students to review. Again, on this map here, the wayfinding doc is linked. So if you go to the URL that I said at the beginning, you can have a copy of this doc. But it's been a game changer for my students. They love it. Even though I have everything on the LMS and it may seem a little bit redundant to have both, it has really helped students, even in class, understand what's coming next. So it's almost like a lesson plan. We have the synchronous tasks that we're all going to complete in class. Then we have the asynchronous tasks. And it also has all the class dates. It has all the assessments. And usually I do it for about 2 weeks out. So I really like it, and I'm going to continue doing it because my students seem to really like it as well. It's easier for them to navigate everything. So that can be a really important tool. Another thing that I started doing last year, which I think I will continue doing, is recording directions. So either recording a video of myself or recording myself speaking, saying all of the directions. It takes just a couple more seconds for me to do this. And when I do it, I ask students at the beginning, okay, listen to the directions, and I'll say them out loud, but I'll also have these recorded so students can go back and listen to them if they need something repeated or if they need something gone over. Again, it's a little thing, but it makes a big difference to a lot of students. So it's very important. Next, we're going to talk about frequent formative fun. Lots of little ways for students to demonstrate their understanding throughout the class. We're going to talk about self-quizzing. We're going to talk about classroom games. We're going to talk about collaboration on slides and Jamboard. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about virtual whiteboards. So self-quizzing, I think, is a really important tool. Having students be able to assess kind of where they're at by going through and giving themselves a quiz. And I do this with the student pace mode in Pear Deck. I do that with Edpuzzle and PlayPosit. Those are the two things there. The puzzle is Edpuzzle, the dog is PlayPosit. I do this a ton with Quizlet. I assign Quizlets to my class and have them go through things on their own. And I also do it with Formative. I keep calling it Go Formative. It used to be Go Formative. And so Formative is great too, because you can give text feedback to students as they're completing something. And if you get the paid version, you can actually give emojis and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. And I think it's a great option. And in something like Go Formative, you can add the directions too. You can add a video of the directions. You can add an audio recording of the directions so students can go back and look at that too. So there's a lot of advantages there. Also, classroom games. I play at least 2 games a class. I know that seems like a lot, but it's a really fun way to engage students. And the game I play at the beginning of class is usually reviewing what we did in the previous class. And at the end of class, it's usually reviewing what we went over during that class. And students love the games. They're a great way for them to bond, to be a little competitive, and they're all really different. So that's why I like to switch it up between Blue-Kit and Quizlet and Kahoot and Gimkit, and go back and forth. There's a lot of fun modes you can use as well. And I've indicated a ton of different links here. Feel free to copy any of these and modify them as you see fit. I love doing collaboration on Google Slides. So what I'll do is I'll assign either a copy of a slide deck or assign a different slide to each group. Again, using the comment function and the @ with the student emails. I also, as a redundancy, have a slide at the very beginning that indicates to students which slides they are assigned, just in case they accidentally delete the assignment comment. So that's really helpful. So here is a bunch of Google Slides. Have fun looking through them. Again, for collaboration, if you go to the link, you should have access to all of these. Similarly, on Jamboard, the first jam is always telling students which jams are assigned, and then students go to the jam and do whatever that activity is. And Jamboard's really cool. It's a little bit like a whiteboard. It's a little bit like a bulletin board. Students can put sticky notes all over it and move them around. And so it's really fun to do jigsaw activities. It's really fun to have students do collaborative brainstorming. There's just a lot of different things students can do. So highly recommend checking it out. One of my favorites is actually when I put in a document and I use the same color as the document. So let's say it's a white document. I use the color white to color out all the answers. And then students can check their work by erasing that color. And they have a lot of fun with that. And that's really nice because all the answers are already there so they can check themselves, but they use the sticky notes to put what they would have put as answers, and then they check their work. So it's a fun way to do it. Another thing I like to use are virtual whiteboards. And I like them because, first of all, some of them are collaborative. Whiteboard chat and Jamboard there can be collaborative, but students can also just share them with me. And I like them because I can ask questions as we're doing something else. Like say, for example, we're reading a novella, and then I'll ask a question. And instead of having students raise their hand, I'll have everybody write it on their whiteboard. I use Whiteboard5 for this a lot because students can't see each other's whiteboards, but I can see their whiteboards. So there's no pressure there necessarily to get the, think, oh, I'm not going to answer because I might get the answer wrong. And then I can also see who's answering and check in with them if they're not answering and say, oh, I see you missed this one. How can I help you? And so it's a really fun way to ask questions in a way where everyone can participate. And I can see how everyone's doing and check in with the short formative assessments. Next, we're going to talk about differentiation. And I love this sign. I saw this picture a long time ago, and I really think it's important because it's all roads lead to learning. And that's really what it's all about. So create many different options that students can use to demonstrate learning. Maybe you ask them questions. Maybe you have students draw their answers. Maybe they write about their answers. Maybe they make a video about their answers or make a collage. My students love doing kind of collage things about novellas. So I'll have students do different pictures, different quotes, and really indicate the action of what happened in the chapter, but in their own kind of artistic way. And they can also do things like cartoons and things like that as well. So it's just really fun to have them to have a little creativity and a way to show what they know in something that's a little bit different. Another thing I love to do is station rotation model, where students have to do a number of different activities to demonstrate their learning. And again, I've linked some station rotation models I've created in the past to this document. So feel free to look through. Some of my favorites are Do Now Dice. Students roll dice to figure out what activity they're going to do next. Treasure Island, students pick a treasure to figure out which activity they're going to do next. And Spin the Wheel, students spin a wheel and they get a color and they follow to where that color is to figure out what they're going to do next. I wouldn't use that if you have anyone who has color vision differences, because I think that might be inequitable, but it's something you can use. And also that's something you should talk about with your students and have your students let you know about as well, because that can be something that's really challenging for students. And so it will change the way you use colors in your classroom, and it will change the way you'd even do a PowerPoint like this. So I highly recommend checking in with students about that. Another type of differentiation I like to use are choice boards. Students can choose how to show what they know in different ways. So one I made up last summer, I was inspired by someone who did something similar, is Class is Lava, where it's a choice board for lava. And it's just fun because students can do different activities to get different pieces of furniture to travel across the lava. And again, this is great for students who feel strongly that they can do something in one way, but maybe not another. And so why don't they try showing what they know and being proud of themselves by doing that, rather than doing something they might find too challenging or they're not comfortable with doing yet. And so I really like that. Another thing, I shared a Caesar one. So take a look at that. Again, different ways that students can show what they know when they're doing Caesar. I also did one that's pretty specific to Cambridge for chapter 21 of Aqua Sulis. So check that one out as well. These are all linked to the document. Another thing I like to do is choose your own adventure. I have templates for these. So if you're interested, please feel free to email me. The choose your own adventure template, I have a traditional one where you have like a scenario with have different options you choose, but I also have one for differentiation where I have a series of questions, and then if students pick the correct answer, they go to the next question. But if they pick an incorrect answer, they go to a slide that has either a Quizlet or a video or something that will help them know what the right answer is. So it's basically a review slide. So that's something that I use and I really enjoy. And you can do that in Google Slides, or you could do that in Google Forms, just depending on what you want to do. So it's something fun to check out. Another thing I like to do, and I've said this before, is having students work at their own pace. So that could be using Pear Deck, that could be using Google Slides, that could be using Forms, that could be using Formative, or it could be using Quizlet. All of these are great for having opportunities for students to work at their own pace and really work in a way where there's less pressure. And I especially like using Pear Deck and Formative for this because I can give students feedback as they go through. And also finding alternatives to traditional assessment. So for example, something I used to do a lot was I read about spider web discussions and I thought, oh my goodness, that would be wonderful for Latin and having students use Latin evidence to back up their claims. But then I had some feedback from students that it was actually really difficult for them to participate in class and to talk aloud. And so I switched my spider web discussions so that students had the option to do it not only by speaking up in class, but also by setting up a series of discussion questions on Google Classroom so that students can be having back channel conversations while other students are talking in the spider web discussion. And I found that this format was so nice because it really helped all students participate in this spider web discussion in different ways. Another thing I've been trying to do a lot with are projects. And my favorite type of project to do is an integrated performance assessment where students are doing an interpretive task, an interpersonal task, an intercultural task, and a presentational task. And so that's something I've been having students do as well in lieu of more traditional assessments. And that's something where students can really demonstrate their learning, and I can really lean on the ACTL standards a lot when I'm doing that, just so that I can see, okay, students, you're doing really well with this, you're an intermediate low, but for this, you really hit, here's not what novice mid looks like, and here's what you need to do if you want to get to novice high. And so that's been really helpful for those proficiency standards as well. Next, we'll talk about anticipating assessment. And I like to say anticipating assessment because for my students, and honestly, for me as a student, it was the thinking that it was coming that was hard. And so we don't want students to be stressed about assessment. Maybe a little bit, not like that though, not so stressed. And so one of the things that I find that's really helpful is giving a full practice assessment, or at least one of each type of question they'll be asked so that students are being assessed on what they know rather than how they can answer unknown question types. We don't want it to be about how well the student take a test. It's how well do they know the content? How well can they demonstrate skills? Eliminate gotcha questions. Really, assessment is about what students know. If you put on something that's complete gotcha or something that really is not something they learn, but something that maybe a few of them saw in the text, like the urban legend of the professor who only tests on the captions for the pictures in the textbook. Like, that's not fair. You want to know how students are doing. It's all about knowing how students are doing when you're assessing. So why would you do something that's a gotcha question? Also, something that's really helped my students is giving extra time for everyone if necessary. I've changed all of my assessments so that they only take a half an hour so that my students who have extra time have that extra 15 minutes. And I really limit it to just a few skills per assessment so that it's easier for all students. And anyone can have that extra 15 minutes. Some students really don't want the other students to know they have extra time. And so by allowing everyone to have extra time, it really helps kind of level the playing field for all students. And so I usually do a half an hour assessment and anyone can have that extra 15 minutes, which is really helpful. And again, for anticipating assessment, giving feedback during and after the assessment can be really, really helpful. Again, I've talked about pear deck, formative, and also moat for after the assessment. Some students really appreciate, again, having those voice comments rather than written comments to talk about how they're doing. And this can be something that you put on Google Classroom. This can be something you put on a Google Doc or even on Google Slides as you go through things. Finally, at the very end, give an opportunity for students to give feedback. As we said before, well, what did you find challenging? And something I like to do on assessments, what do you wish you had been asked about? Tell me. And so that gives another opportunity for students to show their learning. And finally, I ask, what do you want your teacher to know? I studied really hard. I didn't get a good sleep last night. I'm not feeling well today. All of that is so important, and it's a great check-in for students. So those are some of the ways that I try to make my own classroom inclusive and accessible for all students. So please feel free to reach out. I am Maureen Lamb, latintechtools@gmail.com. My Twitter is @LatinTechTools. My Instagram is LatinTechTools. And please feel free to reference this, go back, use any of the resources freely, share freely. You can access this at tinyurl.com/neurodiversity case study LAM. Thank you so much for listening. Valete omnes.